Third oral question, Lord Ricker.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, the UK money laundering regulations require the Government to make an assessment of the UK's money laundering and terrorist financing risks and to keep this assessment up to date. The Government has accordingly published a National Risk Assessment in 2015, 2017 and 2020. Assessments detailing specific threats are published by the UK Law Enforcement more regularly, including the National Crime Agency's National Assessment Centre and by the National Economic Crime Centre.
I thank the Minister for the answer, but is he not curious about the effects of transnational kleptocracy by British professional service providers such as HSBC and Mishcon de Reya, enabling crooked elites to launder their money and reputations? And will he condemn, as does the recent Chatham House report, the lawyers and PR agents who make quasi-libel defamation cases against journalists and researchers researching into money laundering, and then go on to deter the ill-resourced regulators who can be bought off, as was the case in the recent Mishcon case?
I'm sure the Noble Lord will be aware of a number of very substantial fines that have been levied for breaching money laundering regulations over the last few years. Goldman Sachs in 2020, 48 million. Standard Chartered Bank in 2019, 102 million. And even in the last few weeks, NatWest Bank was handed a fine of 264 million. And I think this just emphasises our commitment to dealing with this whole area.
My Lords, having had the dubious privilege of being one of those who helped to draft the anti-money laundering directives in Brussels, and thereby finding his friends describing him as an expert in money laundering, may I just inquire of my noble friend about the word proportional, which appears in the directive. Does he feel that that word is being properly applied by our financial institutions to small investors and those who are not ever to be engaged in money laundering? And does he think that that is balanced and fair and that we have the right approach?
Well, I would certainly defer to my noble friend as someone who is an expert in this area, which I am not, but it is extremely difficult to get the right level of balance in these things, because what one person would consider an intrusion, another would consider a protection. So I think that we have to remain alert and sensitive to the different forces, but what's most important is that we have a coherent system which is clamping down on an extremely complex and fast-evolving crime.
My Lords, Pandora Papers showed that 15...
Please. My Lords, in last year's parliamentary debate on the Church Action for Tax Justice report, Tax for the Common Good, the Minister assured us that progress was being made on reducing money laundering and financial fraud in our British overseas territories and Crown dependencies. Would the Noble Lord the Minister be able to update the House? And if not, he can't do it now, would he please write to me with the information of the progress we're making?
My Lords, it's important just to remind the House that the overseas territories are independent entities and that we cannot just force them to comply with our own regulations, but we have an ongoing dialogue with them. For example, we have a very useful exchange of information through the exchange of notes arrangements, which and they've agreed to introduce publicly accessible registers of company beneficial ownership. So the discussions are very much ongoing, and I respect the Right Reverend Prelate's concern.
My Lords, at the Anti-Corruption Summit in 2016, the Government committed to producing a register of overseas owners of British properties. In 2018, it produced a draft bill on that, and the bill has still to become law. Could the Government say whether it is, in fact, committed to stopping this sort of overseas activity in the UK?
My Lords, I can certainly assure the House that we are absolutely committed to stopping this. I do accept that the introduction of this bill is taking too long, but there are very active discussions going on at the moment about a new economic crime bill, and I would hope very much that we might see the introduction within the next few months.
My Lords, the Noble Lord's colleague, Lord Viscount Younger, said at the Nix bill In the last 3 years, we have recovered over 550 million from the proceeds of crime, charged over 100 people with money laundering offences, and seen over 75 people convicted of money laundering. My lords, that's a pathetic figure. Well, listen, it feels like a pathetic figure. In the original answer, the noble lord indicated that assessments had been made over 3 recent years. What he failed to do is tell us what the answer was. Could he provide the answer so we can judge the success so far and see whether, in fact, the right resources and energy are being devoted to this issue?
Yeah. My lords, I think if we're to go to the very top-down figures here, which are ultimately the most important ones, I think that I would look at the tax gap, which we have been very successful in closing over a number of years. In the year 2005-06, it was 7.5%, and in the last year available 2019-20, that was down to 5.3%. And that is, of course, against the enormous headwinds of the build-up of hot money around the world. So I would be more optimistic, and I would say that we are making good progress.
My Lords, it is the turn of the Liberal Democrats, and Lord Jones of Cheltenham wishes to speak virtually. I think this is a convenient point to call him.
My Lords, the Royal United Services Institute suggests that the scale of money laundering in the UK is too big to measure. Transparency International has had a stab at it and says the problem may be causing £325 billion worth of harm to the UK economy each year. Why has the UK become such a magnet for this illegal activity, which damages the vital financial services sector and our reputation as a safe place to do business?
My Lords, as I'm sure the noble lord will be aware, the City of London is one of the largest financial centres in the world, and therefore the flows of money going through our economy, in particular in the city, are enormous. However, we do lead the world in our attempts to reduce this activity, this bad activity. And if I refer you perhaps to the economic crime plan, where there were some 48 action points taken to tackle the whole spectrum of money laundering and financial crime, we're in good shape in implementing those, and we are committed to an economic crime plan 2.0 that will be announced this autumn.
My Lord, back to the question on resources, there is some evidence that where banks are referring cases to the police, that the police are not, it's not high up on their agenda. Do the police have sufficient resources to tackle this crime and to investigate it thoroughly?
My Lords, we do have the National Crime Agency as the main crime-fighting force in anti-money laundering. They are an extremely effective organisation. They are well-funded. Of course, one could always say that more money is needed, but I can assure my noble friend that we believe we have adequate resources.
The Minister has mentioned some fines in respect of a limited number of banks. Much of the money laundering is in respect of property transactions, particularly in London. Would the noble lord say, since the passage of the 2018 SOCLA Act, how many prosecutions there have been of professional people who facilitate money laundering, the estate agents, the solicitors and others?
My Lords, over 97,000 organisations are monitored for anti-money laundering in this country, and there are some 54 anti-money laundering inquiries open with the FCA at the moment.
Could the noble Lord the Minister refer to the work, and he's already referred to it, of the Assets Recovery Agency? Paramilitary organisations have undertaken considerable money laundering over many, many years throughout the UK. Can the Minister provide us with a detailed assessment, including figures of the amounts that have actually been laundered by paramilitary organisations, and I think in particular of Northern Ireland, where this has had an insidious impact on society?
I share the noble Baroness's concern about money laundering getting into the hands of serious organised crime groups. But we are very much aware of the concerns. I don't think one can put a figure on it, because if one knew what it was, we would be able to stop it. But we have created a large umbrella structure to oversee all of these organisations. It is overseen by the Chancellor and the Home Secretary, and underneath that sit a number of organisations, for example, the Office of Professional Body Anti-Money Laundering, and there are a whole range of these agencies who are now working, and they are sharing intelligence. I believe we are getting better all the time.